Hey everybody, ronarray here, and speedy builds with screen clear are always fun to play. And in this video, I want to showcase my starter for 3.29, Ethereal Knives Ignite Elementalist, which is exactly like that. Ethereal Knives received some buffs this patch, making early progression easier, before you reach Massacre version and start hitting the whole screen with your knives. Elementalist is still one of the strongest classes to start with. It provides a lot of bonuses, and while some builds, such as Winter for example, could be too expensive this league, Ethereal Knives should stay very flexible and much cheaper. The build has great clear, pretty fast movement, together with a very smooth gameplay loop, making it a great option for farming maps and AoE-based mechanics. In this build guide, I will be covering everything, starting from the main interactions and explaining how to scale the build to the endgame version. I will also provide step-by-step PoB that you can check in the pinned comment and in the description that you can follow while playing yourself. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you appreciate detailed guides, and let's go! So when playing Ethereal Knives, we're mostly going to focus on ignite damage, spreading our ignites with various proliferation options. On top of that, we will also stack heralds to combine with Bringer of Ruin passive to increase the DPS, plus combine it with Lost Unity in the endgame. Since it's an elementalist build, golems are also included. They will provide mana regen, damage, life regen, and various quality of life. And later on, we can also add Lucia Bloodline with Farewell to the Flesh for even more damage. For survivability, we're mostly going to focus on block, together with using Servant of Decay to get more tankiness and DMG at the same time. So you will be able to find all my PoBs linked in the pinned comment and in the description. When you're checking those, please change the loadouts up here and do not change the parts of the build manually here, because unfortunately sometimes it's not replacing parts of the tree, not replacing jewels and other things. So using loadout instead when you're looking at that, it will be significantly easier for you. Right here I have everything mentioned, so like from level 10 up to level 98, which is uber expensive, and you will be able to pick any based on your progress. Most of the time I expect that you will play like level 90 variation right here and slowly swap to level 96, which is significantly stronger compared. Just look at the prices for items and pick whatever you can afford at the moment. So talking about the build in more detail, let's start with the basics. And at the start, I believe that just playing with Rolling Magma is still a very solid option. There are definitely a few other options for like Elemental, and I think TB at the moment is pretty solid as a starting skill, but since we would like to take Firewalker and take basic fire passives for Elemental early on, I believe that just going with Rolling Magma is going to be absolutely fine, especially if you're going to combine it with like Holy Flame Totem and Flame Wall, which is a very basic leveling setup. When you will get your first Ascendancy, you will be able to swap to your next skill, which is going to be Armageddon Brand. Armageddon Brand is pretty nice for leveling, mostly because it's like a fire-based skill, and as a fire-based skill is going to ignite by itself pretty good. And your first Ascendancy going to be not Shaper of Flames, but Liege of Primordial instead, because golems at the start are very strong, they're going to practically carry you through the campaign. That way, I believe that going for the Liege is much better, especially if you can combine it with like Armageddon Brand. So at that moment you can just go up and take all possible fire-based nodes here, obviously take Elemental Overload and Rune Binder as well to get like an additional brand early on. Around level 55 you will get your second Ascendancy, and when you will get Shaper of Flames you will be able to swap immediately from the Armageddon Brand finally to Ethereal Knives. At that point you can just swap those 2 points, so you don't need Rune Binder anymore, and all your attacks are going to ignite enemies. That way you can just focus on getting Golem Commander and various Herald bonuses. At that point you will just need to stack your ignite damage. So early in the campaign, at least until you will finish, I recommend to use Eldrich battery as a way to deal with your mana issues. Eldrich battery is pretty nice, especially if you get some energy shield on your items. And you can also leech some energy shield just with like one passive point right here. Even if the leech itself is not going to be too big, it's still pretty nice. So when you will finish the campaign, I think there is a big point to drop Eldrich battery and to keep the energy shield as a defensive layer instead. The big downside for builds which are like Elementalist with Ignite variations is how hard is it to make them tankier, because very often they're pretty squishy, especially if they're using Eldrich battery and like energy shield is absolutely useless. But I believe that we can get just enough mana regeneration to compensate our mana cost of skills. So for example at 90, as you can see, we have more mana regens and like mana cost of Ethereal Knives of the Massacre. That way, I believe we don't really need Eldrich battery, especially since we're going to get a lot of bonuses from golems, including the mana regeneration. There's also another cool node which can help us out tremendously in case if we will need more mana, is Mystic Bulwark. It's going to give you 1% mana regeneration rate per 1 chance to block spell damage. And since you're capping your spell block chance, just getting that node can fix all your mana issues if you will ever have any. And since you're going to stay up anyway, you will need to spend no more than 4 points to get Mystic Bulwark up. So campaign progression should be very straightforward, and around level 90 we can start getting some uniques for ourselves. Right here we can go for Obliteration Wand if it's not going to be too expensive. Also Gloomfang Amulet is absolutely amazing just because it's providing a pretty decent amount of damage, and Chaining feels amazing in maps. And Polaric Devastation is going to help us with damage, especially at single target, since we can cover enemies in Ash with that. So around level 96 we'll have even more uniques, and I believe since we have a new currency from Legion, having that big amount of uniques is going to be a pretty big upside. Right here we can get like a Lost Unity, Polaric Devastations, and swap the Gloomfang to Replica Dragonfang if it's going to be not too expensive. However, we will always be able to just use replicas or use a Gloomfang, or if your budget is crazy high, you also will be able to use like a focused amulet for plus levels for your Ethereal Knives. So there's also a few important things that you will need to keep in mind. During your progression in the campaign, you will need to make sure that you have enough strength and dexterity. So using big nodes right there and taking practical application is going to be very important. Try to pick the items with like strength and dexterity everywhere where you can find them. However, around like higher levels, you will be able to get Elegant Hubris for yourself using Supreme Ascendancy. That way, you're going to completely ignore all the attributes, and any kind of Hubris is going to work just fine for it, but if you will be able to get like additional physical damage, for example, right here, it's going to be just perfect. But we're mostly going to use Hubris here just for Supreme Ascendancy, so make sure that you have it when you're buying your Hubris and try to get it as fast as possible so you'll be able to just ignore attributes completely, especially since attribute requirement for the build is pretty high. And in the endgame build, in terms of what items to buy, I think it will heavily depend on the prices. If Replica Dragonfang is going to be pretty cheap, I probably would focus on that first. However, getting like Polaric is going to be pretty basic, and Lost Unity could cost a lot still that league, so it's probably going to be one of the items that you're getting last. Servant of Decay could be a very nice option, even in like a non-corrupted version, just because of 6% of damage from hit is taken from Void Spawn lives, and 6% of non-chaos damage is extra chaos per summoned Void Spawn. That way, getting Servant is definitely recommended. And Grace of the Goddess could be replaced with any good rare wand. For example, in level 90 variation, I have like Obliteration, but there's also a very variation of a wand like that, so like a lot of plus levels, damage multiplier, spell damage, fire damage over time multiplier, and stuff like that. As you can see, it's out-damaging obliteration pretty easily, and even if you will compare it against Grace of the Goddess, such wand is going to be only 15% worse. So if Grace of the Goddess will cost a little too much in 3.29, make sure that you're just using a rare wand like that instead. In the endgame, we're also going to use a lot of tattoos. At the moment, just using Tattoo of inuqie Shaman for 5% increase the effect of herald buffs on you is definitely recommended. To the left, when you will have currency, Red Nightmare is absolutely amazing because you can get fire damage as extra chaos from it, and also passives granting fire, granting you block. So that way you can use tattoos for fire resistance and get block from all of them. In the variation of level 96, I have 73 to 77 block, and in the uber expensive version I have swollen, so block is a little higher, it's about 81-82%. You can actually push it up to 90, however that depends on changing the passives, and I'm probably just going to test it in the league itself to see what is going to be the best way. Also, a pretty important part is understanding how damage over time is working and what is a dot cap. So in general, when you're playing Path of Exile, there's like a maximum amount of damage that damage over time can do. So damage over time can go higher than about 38 millions. That way, to calculate the damage of all uber expensive versions with like damage over time belts, you need to swap enemy stats to uber pinnacle balls. That way it will be much easier to calculate, especially if you're dot capped. My current version is not exactly dot capped, it's stopped around 36.5 millions, so it is close but not completely dot capped. However, I will probably tweak PoB a little and change some parts of the build to finally reach the cap just in case. So keep that in mind and don't forget to change the config every time when you're going to calculate it for yourself. Also, in the last variations like level 96 and level 98, you can use Farewell to the Flash bonus from Lucia. Right here, it can give a pretty decent amount of damage, it's about 20%, and I think it's definitely worth the points. So to use it, you will need to get Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flash to one of the passives for Elementalist. I think that Leech of Primordial is going to be too expensive. However, either Bringer of Ruin, Mastermind of Discord, or Shaper of Flames will be very available because like some of them going to be significantly less popular than the other. You can pick any which is going to be the cheapest at the moment. So just check which one is going to be more available for you. I'm absolutely sure it's not going to be Leech of Primordial because a lot of occultists are going for that passive. Right here an example, I have like Bringer of Ruin instead, and I think pretty often it's going to be that. Also, if you feel like you want more survivability, you can try to use Bastion of Elements just because it can give a pretty decent amount of tankiness, especially against elements, but I don't really believe it's necessary because build still should feel kinda tanky, mostly based on the block. And the biggest issue is still going to be physical damage and not elemental damage because our physical is not that high. The build is also working pretty great with variety of belts. So if you like, you can just play Headhunter or Mageblood or any expensive belt like that, but I have like a basic Stygian set there just in case. It can practically go with like any stats and mostly used for defense. However, it's very flexible, so any kind of belt that you would prefer to play is possible right there. And the same goes with the body armor. So initially, as you can see, I'm using Servant of Decay. However, as an option, you can also use like a Calamity Destroyer, Regalia for increased effect of herald buffs on you, which can provide a pretty decent amount of additional damage. However, I believe that getting like tankiness up is worth it, so I prefer Servant of Decay personally. There's also an option to use a rare body armor instead, which could be pretty solid too and can boost your defenses even further. So if you feel squishy, feel free to just swap a body armor to like additional energy shield one, probably together with armor, and try to get like as big amount of energy shield and life here as you can to survive better. The same flexibility could be up there in the cluster jewels too. Early cluster jewels I think working the best with like Primordial Bone, because it can provide a pretty decent amount of damage and life for your golems and buffs from your golems too. However, in the higher variations you're probably going to stick with Prismatic Heart and Sadist, because it's going to give enough damage by itself and you don't really care about your golems that much anymore. But feel free to just swap those jewels around based on the prices and based on what is available, because probably the strongest part of that build is flexibility, since you can swap it the way you like and change a lot of things without breaking the whole build itself. And the last question is like, at what moment you should replace your Ethereal Knives with Ethereal Knives of the Massacre? Usually I think you should do that when your initial damage issues are completely solved. So around level 70 and like starting the maps, I would still probably play normal Ethereal Knives to make sure I'm dealing enough damage. However, around level 90, when my damage is already enough and I have other things for the clear, and like especially if I will get Obliteration Wound early, I will swap to Ethereal Knives of the Massacre. You can always buy a second gem and just test it out to make sure if you're ready or not. Mostly, Ethereal Knives of the Massacre is going to provide better clear, when normal Ethereal Knives are going to provide better damage, especially if you're not using deadly elements. So at that moment, I think it's pretty much it, and I hope you will have a lot of fun in 3.29, doesn't matter what kind of build you will play. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. ronarray out.